Welcome to another off-season edition of Giants Roundup. The winter meetings have just concluded, and Bryce Harper and Manny Machado are still available. This is really starting to mirror the last season's free agency with a lot of the big names still available. You still got Harper, Machado, Dallas Keuchel remains unsigned. So certainly we've got some. So this is starting to look a lot like last year. So maybe Bryce Harper's not going to get $300 million. He may not get $400 million. We'll see what happens. But still, signs are pointing to Bryce Harper going to the Southsiders, known as the Chicago White Sox. So we'll see how that works out. But we'll see what happens with Machado, where his market is. His price tag has certainly dropped thanks to trades and all that good stuff. Dallas Keuchel, another one where teams are reluctant to sign him for his price. Definitely a guy whose velocity has declined the last couple years, but more teams might look to acquire talent. That's a real possibility. And that could hurt some other players going into next year's free agency class. So this could really have a lot of major ramifications when it comes to the 2021 CBA. And after what I've seen from this year's winter meetings, I really think the possibility of a work stoppage, as in terms of a player's strike or a lockout, is looking more and more likely, as now owners could really start pushing for an actual salary cap in the 2021 CBA, or certainly players who are, the big loser's been Scott Boras, who's overvalued his players the last few seasons. So I'm really starting to think it could. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see a player strike, because players aren't getting those big money contracts that they're getting accustomed to, thanks to analytics and sabermetrics. And it could get interesting for Rob Manfred if a lockout does happen under his watch. So that is something that certainly we'll have to keep an eye on, as it's been another very slow offseason. Now let's get on to the hirings and signings of this week. Baltimore Orioles signed Brandon Hyde as the new manager. And he's a guy who's an analytics guru and is tasked with a very long rebuild in Baltimore. So there'll certainly be a lot of patience in Baltimore. And then Mike Napoli announces retirement due to injuries, and he was an All-Star in 2011, World Series champion in 2013 with the Boston Red Sox. Definitely been hurt the last few years, so Napoli retires. Blue Jays decide to release Troy Tulowitzki, and they are going to they're buying him out for $38 million. Missed last season due to bone spurs in the heels. Sidelines for long stretches in 2017. But there's a lot of uncertainty that he can stay healthy. So they've decided to move on. We'll see what happens there. Certainly some teams could look to sign him for the league minimum in 2019. The Detroit Tigers signed Tyson Ross to a 1-year, $5.75 contract. Definitely could be a good trade chip for Detroit. And he will join Matt Moore, and it's just two pieces that could help. And Matt Moore looking to rebound from what has been the last 3 years have been very disastrous for Matt Moore. Now in the Detroit organization, these are Probably just short-term contracts to help try to lure more prospects into the system. So we'll see how that works out. And then the White Sox traded for Ivan Nova. So they add a veteran arm to the rotation. Definitely a big indication the White Sox are spending money this offseason. They're certainly hoping to get that guy named Bryce Harper to the south side of Chicago. But Nova certainly could be a number 2, number 3 part of the White Sox rotation. And Detroit and the Kansas City Royals signed Billy Hamilton to a 1-year, $4.25 million contract, and has a $7.5 million option for 2020. And I think he's definitely a good fit for Kauffman Stadium. It is a pitcher's ballpark. And definitely his speed could work really well in Kansas City. And it looks like Brian Goodwin could be out of a roster spot with Brett Phillips and Alex Gordon. So I could also see Billy Hamilton being a fourth outfielder coming off the bench. That is a real possibility. But also could be just a rental to get more prospects in Kansas City. The Phillies surprisingly signed Andrew McCutchen to a 3-year, $50 million contract. And he will make $10 million this year, $17 million in 2020, and $20 million in 2021. And it comes with a $3 million buyout. And I certainly, McCutchen's production and power have declined the last 2 years, but definitely an upgrade in the batting order now. And certainly I think McCutchen could hit a lot more dingers over there in Philadelphia, with Citizens Bank Ballpark being a lot more hitter-friendly than AT&T Park. So he could certainly get back to 20 to 25 home runs next year in Philadelphia. And he might be batting number 5, number 6 in the batting order next year. So it's looking like the Phillies are going to. It's looking like the Phillies are in big, and they've added some power. It's not quite a Bryce Harper, but it is what it is, I will say. And it's looking more and more likely that Harper may not be coming to Philadelphia, so this might not be a bad plan B for the Phillies. And the Tigers are signing Jordy Mercer to a 1-year, $5 million contract. He will play shortstop. And this is just another bridge option for Detroit. And a big winner in this year's winter meetings is the Tampa Bay Rays. They sign Charlie Morton to a 2-year, $30 million contract if he can stay healthy. But definitely Morton has been a great starter, a World Series hero for the Astros the last couple years. But this was a great signing by the Rays. He will definitely fit in the rotation with, oh God, I'm trying to think of who's that the ace they have now. They've certainly got Austin Snell, I think. I think his name is Austin Snell. Blake Snell. And you got that ace in Blake Snell for the Rays. So definitely Charlie Morton definitely solidifies that rotation. And then of course you got that guy from the Padres they got from the Pirates they got last year. So that's one. And then they've certainly got a couple more pros. Tyler Glasnow. You got Tyler Glasnow as your 3. So it's not a bad rotation. You got Ian Snell. You got Ian Snell. You've got Charlie Morton, and of course you've got Tyler Glasnow. So that's not a bad three-headed monster in the rotation. And certainly they're not going to be done. They've got and of course I think they got Garrett Richards. I think they got Garrett Richards. Or no, he went to San Diego. That's right. But certainly they could look to bring in Mike Fiers as a possibility. Matt Shoemaker could be a good rehabilitation project for the Rays. I don't see the Rays being done. And it definitely is going to force the Astros to look in the trade market to acquire a number 3 starter. We'll get to that a little later when I get to Madison Bumgarner. But that certainly could get the price up on Dallas Keuchel too. And it looks like the LA Dodgers will be signing Joe Kelly to a 3-year contract worth $25 million. He definitely could be the setup man next year going forward to Kenley Jansen. And certainly a setup man they need in the Dodgers bullpen. The Texas Rangers sign a 3-year, $30 million contract for Lance Lynn, who did not have that great of a year last year, but certainly maybe going to be a veteran presence in a rotation that's really weak in what's going to be a rebuild situation in Arlington with Drew Smyly and Edison Volquez when healthy, so it may not be that bad of a starting rotation on that. The Reds acquire Tanner Roark for Tanner Rainey in a trade of the Tanners. And Tanner Roark will certainly could be the back-end starter for the Reds and could definitely fit in either the back end of the rotation or he could always be in the bullpen. But certainly the Reds are not done signing starting pitching, not by any means with that signing. The LA Angels signed Justin Bour to a 1-year, $2.5 million contract and certainly could possibly be a sign that they're getting ready to buy out Albert Pujols at some point. Or they could, we'll see what happens with that, but Pujols could be, but also we could see more of a platoon between Bour and Pujols in 2019, so that gets really interesting there with the Angels wanting to get out of that Pujols contract really soon. So we'll see what happens there. The Milwaukee Brewers acquire left-hander Alex Claudio. And he could be competing for the closer role next year with Hader. So we'll see what happens there in spring training. And a big trade made today. Edwin Encarnacion, Carlos Santana, and Yandy Diaz all traded. The Rays get Yandy Diaz and Cole Sulser from the Indians. The Rays will send Jake Bowers to the Indians. And $5 million in cash going from Seattle to Tampa Bay. And Edwin Encarnacion goes to Seattle. But it remains to be seen that he stays in Seattle, so we'll see what happens there. And that concludes what happened in winter meetings for the most part. Now on to Giants signings. And the Giants made a couple signings in the Rule 5 draft. It's like Travis Bergen is a guy who could compete for one of the final spots in the Giants bullpen next year. With other candidates could be Tyler Beatty. Of course, you've got Derek Law. Stephen Okert could be an option for the last roster spot. And of course, Ray Black, depending on what happens in spring training. And it also could mean, too, that the Giants could be heading for a rebuild. Or maybe not, we'll see. But also they also drafted Drew Ferguson from the Astros organization. Could certainly fit the fourth outfielder role next year. Could get one of the three outfielder spots, depending on what happens. You got Doug. The only one who's really you can pencil in for an everyday outfield role right now with the Giants is Steven Duggar. So certainly Ferguson could compete with Mac Williamson, Chris Shaw in spring training. And of course, we'll see who they sign here before the offseason concludes. You still have guys like Michael Brantley, AJ Pollock, whose prices are dropping. Or other bargain bins the Giants could be looking at. So we shall see what happens there. And also that they've also claimed another player off of waivers. And Zaidi, and I think Zaidi is looking to shed the salary and be cautious here. And I think teams are looking at Brandon Belt. So it's looking more and more likely Brandon Belt could be on his way out of San Francisco if the right trade partner comes along. Madison Bumgarner, if they can get top prospects back for Bumgarner, I think he could be on his way out of San Francisco. So we'll see what happens there. And as I said, now the Astros have kind of missed out on bringing back Charlie Morton, so that really could force the Astros' hand and give the Giants leverage, with the Astros maybe now having to look to trade for possibly a Robbie Ray or Madison Bumgarner. So, and if the Giants can get back a guy like Kyle Tucker in return, and get some other nice prospects back for Madison Bumgarner, I would definitely be open to business on a potential Bumgarner trade there. So I kind of starting to think Houston could be where Bumgarner gets traded when it's all said and done, if Bumgarner is traded. And then I think at some point you're going to start seeing the Giants shop relievers. You could see, I think, Will Smith. That is a guy that is the Giants might be open for business for trading, depending on how the season goes. Tony Watson, definitely another guy who could be on the trading block. And who knows, maybe they can luck out and Mark Melancon can, God willing, have a decent year that maybe he can get that trade value up a skosh, that maybe they can trade him somewhere. I think they would love to get out of that Mark Melanson contract. That would be one that Zaidi would love to get rid of. Sam Dyson, certainly at $5 million. I think they would like to move him at some point. But it tells me that Zaidi's emphasis is really on getting the farm system together and developing more talent from the farm. So that is where I think will happen. But I think it would be a lot of bargain bin signings this offseason, and Mike Gerber claimed on waivers. He didn't hit. Had a bad year last year. Hit in the bingo cards 095, but he did hit 13 home runs in AAA. But I think the power stats is what. So maybe this could be the next Max Muncy. You never know, but that's what Zaidi is really about. He's not going to sign big money contracts, and he's an analytics guy. And I think welcome to analytics for the Giants. And I think this is a much needed change the Giants need. And staying away from Bryce Harper, good move there. Staying out of big money contracts, really good move. I think simply we're just going to be doing bargain bin shopping this offseason and I'm going to say trust the process and enjoy 2019. I'm really starting to think this is bye-bye for Bochy. I think it's going to be another 90 to 100 loss season coming up from what I see right now. But I think it's more, but I don't think it's going to be about contending next year. I'm starting to think it's more about getting the farm system back in order, and that's something Zaidi was with the Dodgers as a deep farm talent, and that's where we need to go. And I think this is the next generation of the Giants, and it might take some pain before you start seeing the results. I am going to be patient on it. But I think this is likely Bochy's last hurrah, and then he's just going to probably retire after the 2019 season. So I think it's more about getting trade values up for a lot of players. And if Belt's traded, you do have a couple in-house options. You could definitely plug Pablo Sandoval back at first base. I certainly think the days of Buster Posey playing catcher every day, I think those days are ending. You could see him really start going 50-50 between first base and catching next year. That is a real possibility there. Another possibility is you're going to see they could go to Ryder Jones. And I think Ryder Jones looked a lot better before he got hurt last year. So that could be the realistic option for 2019. You could definitely give a guy like Chris Shaw. You could give a guy like Ryder Jones an extended look at first base. And Ryder definitely looked much better in his second year in the show before he got hurt. So I wouldn't mind maybe seeing Ryder Jones being your everyday first baseman in 2019, or see Posey and Ryder Jones platoon at first. But I think getting rid of some of these bad contracts is a big step in the right direction for the Giants. And keep at it. Zaidi's I'm just going to simply trust the process. And the Giants are fairly quiet at winter meetings, and that's, to me, is not a bad thing. Rule 5 draft, that's where they made the splash. That tells me it's the farm. Focus on the farm, get that right, and maybe it might take 2 or 3 years, but it's fine. If Bumgarner's traded, I'll be sad, but it's life. Baseball's a business. He will never be forgotten for for his 3 rings, especially his Game 7 in Kansas City. And I think that fans better savor this year's. I think Bumgarner is not coming back after the 2019 season. I think there's a good possibility he's traded after this year. But that's baseball. It's a business. And the Giants need prospects, to be honest. So just enjoy the ride. Belt, he's probably a goner. But if we can play with house money and win, great. If not, it's all right. But you know what? This is the new culture of Major League Baseball, as you've seen at this year's winter meetings. It seems more and more likely teams are not going to spend the big bucks and overpay for Bryce Harper. I think the days of big paydays are going bye-bye. And the last 2 winter meetings is a big indication that GMs are a lot smarter than they were, and they're not going to shell out 10-year, $300 million contracts anymore. And you know what? It might result in player strike or lockout. That's all right. But I think teams are not wanting to get these blunders, and I think salary cap baseball is coming. But now we move on to the holidays. I'm pretty much, unless the Giants make a move or something like that, I'm pretty much going on hiatus until after the new year. Certainly I'll have something to talk about after the new year. I want to talk about maybe the possibility of the elimination of the defensive shift. So I'll be back on after New Year's if we have nothing imminent come on between then and now and after the new year. Thanks for tuning in. Everybody have a great Christmas or a happy holiday. Everybody have a good new year. I will see you in 2019. Goodbye.